The Guardians and Jose Ramirez finally announced their final long-term pact of his career. But now the question everybody keeps asking, what else is there, still looms.
Tanner Bobby of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Guardians fans? Once again, thanks for coming to hang out with us here on the only daily podcast that covers your Cleveland Guardians from the majors, the minors, the draft, and everything in between. That, of course, is here at Locked On Guardians. We welcome all Guardians fans, whether you're enjoying Jose Ramirez declaring his love for Cleveland, making it official, or you're griping about something, which we'll talk about later in today's show. But I'm Justin Lada, one of your two co-hosts here, starting my fourth year on this podcast with my friend and co-host Jeff Ellis. Before that, I have spent 20 years now and counting, covering the Guardians minor league system as a prospect writer and editor, the same amount of time that Jeff has also been doing that. So we've celebrated a lot together, Jeff.
We have. It's been, fun to see this podcast grow for my 7 years here on the show. Before coming to Locked On, I was a national writer at Scout 24/7, focused on prospects in the draft. I want to thank you for making today's show your first listen today, every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. A big shout out to all of our everydayers and to everyone in the Everydayer Club out there. We appreciate all the support, especially when things run a little slow. So thank you all for being there, taking part, interacting, commenting, subscribing. Thank you all.
Yes, appreciate all you. Shout out to all the insiders too that I mentioned before. That is a different grouping than the Everydayer Club, but the Insiders Club. We did have our monthly, or whatever we're calling it, monthly chat meetup on Google Meet. So enjoyed that conversation with everybody. I know those are the hardcore listeners, but we had a lot of fun, as we always do, and we'll do it again maybe sometime next month. On today's show, though, we are going to get into the Jose extension and how great it is, but what else is there? Does that mean there's no other additions? We'll break down some of those comments from Chris Antonetti in that press conference. We'll also dive into whether or not the Guardians need to be more aggressive with prospects, if they intend to rely on them a little more heavily this year. And we'll later on the show, we'll get into some World Baseball Classic news that I know Jeff can't wait to get into. We'll touch on farm system rankings, all that kind of stuff at the end of today's show as well. Also, programming note, Jeff, next week we're back to 5 days a week. So we've kind of made it through the doldrums of winter, not completely. Spring training's still another week away after that. But start next week, Jeff, we're back together for 5 days a week. I got to say, like, you and I do text a lot, and we do, but I feel like the fact that we've only been on one show a week together for the last month or so, we've not talked as much, done as much. So it'll be kind of nice to get back on here and chat every day with all the fans about Guardians baseball once again.
Yep. And, if we're talking about Guardians baseball, we'll also have college baseball opening up and JUCO baseball. So there'll be a lot of different baseball in terms of what is out there to discuss.
Yeah, we'll talk draft, I'm sure, in the next couple weeks or so. Since we are back to 5 days a week, we'll need to come up with lots more to talk about. I know I've been saying, Jeff, I know you're been itching to talk draft, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of college baseball talk in the next month. I'm looking forward to that. I'm working on my prospect handbook for the Guardians right now, so I haven't had a ton of time to dive into the draft, but the next week or two when I finish that up, I will be draft focused from there. So it'll be a lot of fun. So the Guardians officially announced the extension with Jose Ramirez, had a nice press conference in Cleveland despite the crappy weather this week. To go over it all. It was a good press conference, in terms of Jose just saying he loves Cleveland and he's been pushing to get this done for over a year, all that kind of stuff. But of course, the quote that's going to stand out to everybody that everyone's been talking about is the question to Chris Antonetti about whether or not they have done enough to add to this offense around Jose Ramirez. And, Chris Antonetti said, yes, again, when, our offense was not good last year. We know we need to be better. And then he said, as he said, I think a week ago at the Rubber Ducks hot stove dinner, we feel like we can get better internally. And, I mentioned on Thursday's show, Jeff, or Wednesday show, that you can only take these comments at face value. Like, we have to be very careful. You and I like to try to read between the lines a little bit on these front office quotes, but at the same time, we also want to caution ourselves and everybody else that you can only take these words to mean so much. Like, they're not going to go out there and tell you the roadmap for what they're doing. They're not going to paint themselves into a corner. I mean, the fact that Chernoff, the fact that Mike Chernoff said at the end of the year, like postseason wrap up, mentioned about how they need to get better in the outfield and they need to get better offensively. That was like the most forthcoming comment I've heard from anybody in the front office in quite some time. So, be careful about how much stake you put into these words, because, next week, maybe they could sign somebody. I don't know. I'm not saying they will, but like, Jose Ramirez has been saying that he's been pushing for this final extension for a year now, and we only just heard about it publicly, a week ago. So you really never know what's going on. Truthfully, they're never going to tip their hand. They're never going to tell you what's going on. They treat everything like it's a nuclear secret. But at the same time, like, what do you want? I know people were mad. What do you want Chris Antonetti to say? Like, we're going to get into whether or not they should do more, and they should do more. But like, he's not going to say, well, we tried to sign so-and-so, but we didn't get him. And now we're stuck with guys like Daniel Sheeman, Angel Martinez, and George Valera, and they suck. But what are you going to do? Like, he's not going to come out and say anything negative about the guys that are on the roster right now. So of course he's going to say he believes that publicly. They're not going to say anything else. And I don't think any other GM would be different.
No. And like, yeah, it's the whole, we hear more rumblings, we hear stuff through it. And it's like, basically what it comes down to is, for a lot of the outfielders, like for Lane Thomas, for an Austin Hayes, those guys want to be given a job to play every day. The problem is Lane Thomas, was hurt so much of last year. And the problem with Austin Hayes is he's looked like a platoon guy his whole career. Like, giving him a full-time position, you're likely to get worse production than you would from a healthy DeLauter. Let's be honest with that. I know it's saying the words healthy there. Is something I can't guarantee, but the other side is someone like Rob Refschneider, who would have been the ideal platoon candidate, had no interest in coming here. He wanted to go back to where he is from on the West Coast. Like, Cleveland's in this odd situation too, where it's like, if they want to get anyone, they have to overpay. Like, no one's coming here except for Jose on a sweetheart deal. Like, that's just the truth of the matter. If you want to convince someone like Rob Refschneider to come here over Seattle, you probably have to give him $2 or $3 million extra a year, because that's where he wants to be. Like, they lost the bidding wars because they weren't willing to get crazy, which is what you want in the end, because you can't overpay for guys that are not going to elevate you to a high degree, right? Like, if a guy is in one corner and it's an elevation, it's one thing, but it's a hard situation. I mean, there's a guy left out there, but they seem to be so focused on outfielders. I don't know if it happened, but if there's a guy who wanted to play in market rates, would be Suarez at this point, but he's not an outfielder. So I don't know. They seem very focused on this idea of a right-handed outfielder. Make the call for Alex Call. I'm just going to say it. Call the Dodgers. Get him and Ryan Earhart. So then you have the next platoon guy you need out there. And as much as people hate platoons, like, the Dodgers use platoons. Everyone uses platoons. I hate to be this person, but it's like, that's baseball anymore. And it was even baseball a long time ago. Like, it's not like platoons are just a magical new thing. So
Paul Trento and Herbert Perry. Remember those guys? They have a platoon in 1995 at first base.
I mean, remember when Ben Broussard and Eduardo Perez were like a top three offensive first base? So then they traded both of them to get Chu and Cabrera, which was nice.
To be fair, they had a better offensive grouping around them. Like, you had, they did have Hafner. We were just talking about Travis Hafner off air, and we were talking about Victor Martinez and Peralta. And of course, in the 90s, you had, Bell, Tommy, Ramirez, all that kind of stuff. So I get the point of, like, you only platoon a few guys back then versus now it's a little more commonplace for Cleveland. Like, you don't platoon Jose and Quan. Everybody else at this point basically is, but whether or not.
Yeah, and it's a hard situation in terms of, I can't blame them for not wanting to give Austin Hayes and Lane Thomas starting jobs, like, over
they should
Valera or Kafis or DeLauter. Like, does anyone out there actually want that? Like, I'd be kind of curious. And then, it does say, like, that, again, if it's someone like Suarez, guys played third base for so long, can't tell me he couldn't be at least okay at first. Go out and have him do it in spring training. I feel like he had to. He was a shortstop at points. Like,
as fake Ron Washington once said, it can't be that. It's not. It's incredibly hard.
Yeah. It's a situation. I don't know. Like, that's still the guy I'd like to see. But I do think I can at least understand the logic of where they went. We said it's a bad outfield market, and they either weren't the place people wanted to come to, or they weren't willing to give starting jobs to guys who shouldn't get starting jobs.
Yeah, platoons are tough, and we'll talk more about Antonetti's quotes from the press conference. being more careful to read into it, but also kind of reading into what makes sense. And we'll talk about how aggressive the Guardians have to be with young players if they're going to rely on their young core. Coming up next. Well, it's the new year, which means it is tax season. It is coming. I know we got some time before tax day, but it doesn't have to take over your entire life, guys. This year, TurboTax will make it easier for you to hand over things and move on without your day. Very much easy. The full service TurboTax, you get your taxes done by a trusted local expert start to finish. No stress, no guesswork that we all look at every year, wondering if we know how much we're paying and what we need to pay. So you're not spending hours figuring out forms, meeting with local tax experts, all that kind of stuff, or you are meeting with local tax expert in person or connect online. I will tell you personally, because of the job we do here, other freelance gigs that I do, my taxes are incredibly complicated some years. I don't want to do it myself because I don't want to get in trouble. I also don't want the hassle. That's why I rely on places like TurboTax to help me figure it out, so I'm not left guessing. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local tax expert, just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert did not help you file last year. So just file this year by February 28. Taxes can come off your plate. You can get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. Thank you all for hanging out with us on Locked On Guardians, of course, every single day. No matter how you're listening, where you're listening, we do appreciate that. And if you're listening every single day, you might want to consider joining the Everydayer Club, because you can go ad-free and you can join the Discord as well. So you get ad-free episodes, no interruptions, and you get to talk with us in the Discord, casual chats with us, the other Locked On hosts, other MLB hosts, other sports. You can do it all. We have a podcast for every team. We have a Discord for every team. Check that out for $5 a month or $50 a year over at lockedonguardians.supercast.com. So we're talking before about how the Platoon market just didn't work out. Like, this is a very easy quote. Like, we want to be careful about how much we read into these quotes from press conferences and the things that people like Chris Antonetti say, because it's always, fancy doublespeak and trying to say as much as you can without revealing any information. But he mentioned, like, we saw players that they made offers to players that we thought were a specific fit in our roster for a specific role, which, is very easy to lead to platooning, right? And he said that they made comparable deals or that the guys signed comparable deals to what they were offered. And again, it came down to playing time. Like, you're not going to promise Rob Refsnyder he can play every day, or you're not going to pay him $8 million to say, take $2 million extra to come to Cleveland. You can't give Lane Thomas every day at bats. A platoon always made sense. Like, it would have been great if they could have gotten Refsnyder. It would have been great if they could have gotten Lane Thomas and said, like, you're only going to play against lefties. So maybe you'll play against an occasional righty. And that's the guy you want to plug in when Chase DeLauter, inevitably misses time with a stub toe or whatever. Like, that would be great. Austin Hayes, the same thing. Austin Hayes is still on the market. Like, he thinks he's going to get full-time playing time somewhere. I highly doubt that. So, he may still have to settle for that deal. We'll see what happens. The offseason is technically not over, even though teams report to spring training in a week and a half. But we'll see what happens with Austin Hayes. But no, like, a platoon always made sense for this team. That's what we want. That's what I want at this point. But, it's the right fit, but it's not what the guys want, and you're not going to overpay. Like, you can't overpay, like you said, Jeff, Austin Hayes or Rob Refsnyder, and you also cannot guarantee them more playing time. So it sucks. I get it, but that it's like you said, it's a bad outfield free agent market. I'd rather have Suarez play first, some third, DH, because he's just a better fit offensively than the rest of those guys. Yeah.
Or make the call for call. I'm just gonna
make the call for call. Let's talk about trades real quick. Actually, out around that subject. So, great text from one of our insiders, Jordan Myers, today. I was giving our insider some quotes as the press conference was going on if they couldn't tune in. And his response was, they didn't mention trades. They should have said something like, in order to help Jose reach his goal of winning the World Series, have you considered trading any of these younger players and prospects to improve the offense, or are you planning on retaining your title as the organization that hoards prospects the most? I thought that was funny. And I said, well, you can't ask it in that exact phrase. Like no one's going to ask them that question because you're going to get kicked
Banned
out
from life.
Yeah, you'll get banned. So you have to phrase it a little bit better. That's just how it goes. So Jeff, can I give you the quote that I think Antonetti would have said if someone, no one asked him, even in a better tone or a better phrase question, nobody asked about trades. They only asked about additions vaguely. So on a scale of 1 to 10, can you tell me how accurate the statement is if somebody would have asked this question, and what response Chris Antonetti would have said?
Okay.
So I said, I think the answer would have been this. We've been engaged with multiple teams on potential moves this offseason, but the values haven't quite aligned on a deal we thought made sense for us. How accurate is that on a scale of 1 to 10?
I mean, probably like a 9.
That's exactly what he would have said. Like if there would have been a specific question from somebody in the press audience saying, what about upgrades through trades? That's exactly what Chris Antonetti would have said. It takes 2 to tango, and I know we've seen stuff mentioned about Brendan Donovan. Everybody wants to trade for Brendan Donovan. We thought a month ago, by the way, Jeff, that Brendan Donovan was going to the Giants or Seattle or the Giants, and he's still with the Cardinals. So like that, I guess, could still happen, but nobody has wanted to meet their asking price, and that's probably because the Cardinals were asking over what made sense for him. So it takes everybody to line up on trade value. So like the Alex Call thing, like you said, that makes sense. I don't know. Like that's the only thing that makes sense to me at this point, as far as how are you going to add something offensively to this team that's not Stuart Fairchild and oh gosh, I'm forgetting the other outfielder they gave him.
Oh, I was thinking Carter Kaboom, the infielder.
Oh yeah, Carter Kaboom, who people seem to think is a big deal signing. I don't know where people are getting that, but some people think that
because he had
some significance.
He hit in AAA for a team that desperately needed infield hitters and never bothered to call him up. So
yeah, he's so good. He's so good. Yeah. But, I mean, the trade market is what it is. It's been a very weak trade market. I mean, who do they miss out on in trades? Like, who have they not added? Like, who's been traded? And you're like, well, crap, the Guardians should have gone for him.
Dane Myers is the guy we talked about because he would be that, that platoon bat that they need. Like, Dane Myers is probably it. Yeah, it's like, even the recent trades, like some of these lesser ones, there just hasn't been a whole lot of movement on the trade market in general. It's been pitching. It's been pitching, and they have pitching. It's like the other guy I'll keep holding out hope for is Jesus Sanchez. I still think makes sense for the Astros to move him, but those are, I'm pretty consistent with this, I'll say, and it's like the Sanchez and Call sounds like a TV law firm, but those are still the guys that I think are because that's the thing, logical. Like, pieing this guy with Soderstrom. Let's be honest, that was always like a ridiculous thing that I was kind of hoping for fun, but like. The Sanchez's, the Calls, those are the guys who are more likely to move because the Dodgers do have depth. And like, that's the weird situation too, where like they just need, you could probably flip him Nolan Jones back in that deal. So they just have a guy and watch them fix him and turn him into a good player. That's going to be the fun of it. But yeah, it's hard to feel comfortable because even with the great talent that they have, and like, we at some point we'll get into our prospect rankings. And the prospect rankings, this is the most exciting offensive group they've probably had since back when I was like the Carlos Santana, Bo Mills grouping. Then hey, there was a time where Bo Greenwell was like a top 3 hitter of the system to me. I remember those. That was the real dark ages. If you've been around long enough, where you're like, well, Adam Miller is broken, but he's still the number 1 prospect, and Chuck Lofgren, he's no longer pitching anymore. Now he's hitting, and he's your number 2 prospect. Like it was bad for a time there. So, but this is the most exciting group. It's a group that's mostly in the advanced minors, closer to the big leagues. But like, in spite of that, in spite of all that positivity, it's like, we know if you're lucky, half of the prospects will turn to regulars if you're lucky. And the other side of it is a lot of their prospects, they took big swings. For as much as people are like, oh, this is such a conservative organization, or they prospect hug. The interesting thing is when it comes to the draft, they have taken really big gambles on first rounders trying to maximize potential. And it's like, we'll have to see. It's like the Valeras, the DeLauters, the guys who have had those health issues. I mean, heck, we don't even know like Andrew Walters, what he's going to be like in a return. And he was a high pick who they gave a lot of money to that you and I both thought could be their second best reliever last year. potentially, or maybe it's 2 years ago where he thought that before Cade kind of broke out. It's like there's a lot of ways for an improvement, but it's a big gamble to bet on that.
It is. All right, we'll talk more about those young players and how aggressive the Guardians have to be with promotions and development if they're going to rely on those young players. And we'll talk a little bit more about some other news about the World Baseball Classic. We'll dive into some farm system rankings as well here on the end of today's Locked On Guardians. The offseason is so close to being over. Again, I know it doesn't feel like it in Cleveland, but it's close. But we still have like 2 more weeks of technically off season. Next week, Punxsutawney Phil will probably see his shadow, all that kind of stuff. But we'll be talking Guardians baseball 5 days a week next week, which means you got to hit the bell on YouTube so you get the notification when episodes go live, whenever we react to news. I posted Jeff a 5-minute video reacting to today's press conference, talking about some of the stuff we talked about today, just kind of quickly off the cuff at the time. So you would get notified of those sorts of things as well. We'll do some prospect stuff, I think, this year in terms of videos, and hit the auto download feature on all your audio platforms so you never miss an episode as well. Yeah. So the other thing I think we have to think about when it comes to the Guardians, I don't want to say relenting, but obviously because they didn't have a chance to add what they were hoping for in a platoon bat, the way Antonetti kind of phrased it this today. That means they are relying on the young players, which means, how aggressive do they have to be now? Like, if this is going to be the path you are going forward, once again, we're talking about winning while developing. It's threading that ever long needle. I don't know how much more thread or how much thread you have left and how many needles you have left, but they do it every year. So that means there is zero excuse for Chase DeLauter, right? Not being on the opening day roster. Like, you can't both say we're going to rely on our young players and then say, well, Chase DeLauter missed a lot of time, which he has, and then he has to go to AAA to do this or that, or it's cold in Cleveland and we want to bring up guys when they're most confident, especially now. They don't have that argument now, the fact that he played in the postseason with them. It's going to be the same for Valera. I have to ask the same question about Juan Brito, and then we have to ask about, okay, how soon do you have to promote Travis Bazzana? And then there's the CJ Kafis argument, who, even though he graduated, do you have room for Kafis and Valera and DeLauter on this team and Nolan Jones? Like, the reason Kafis came up last year was because Nolan Jones got hurt. So how aggressive do you have to be and how much leeway do you have to give? Because you do, and the reality is you do have multiple young guys. You do have, Kafis, Valera, DeLauter that, you do want to see. And then there's Bazzana. And then further down below, a lot of people, want to believe in Ralphie Velasquez. Some people don't, but some people do. And, how aggressive do you have to be moving those guys up if that's the path you're going to go forward with?
Yeah. And it's also like, how much of an opportunity do you guys get to balancing it out, right? Because the overlap with some of these players. The whole Chase DeLauter thing, but the only reason I could think is that would make any logical sense is it's cold in Cleveland, and coldness is more likely to cause injuries. That would be the
It's
only...
cold in Columbus too, Jeff. It's not that warm there either. Trust me.
That's about the only... I'm not saying this is something I believe at this point in time too. Like, Chase DeLauter is a top 100 prospect everywhere. If he can stay healthy, you got a chance at a rookie of the year. Now, yes, you lose a year of service time doing this. You're gonna and if Chase DeLauter becomes a good player, and just a good player, not a great player, becomes a good player, becomes a solid player. Frankly, one more year of him is worth more than a pick in the 30s, which is what the PPI picks are. I think the
how much do you think?
But
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I honestly think it's a thing for another day. But I think PPI picks have the most value to big market squads, not small market squads, for that reason. Because if a guy's good enough, a big market squad can pay to keep their guys. A small market can't. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, do you care about do you care about one extra year when it's a guy whose bones seem brittle and made of glass? Like, I don't think it's worth it. Yes, like, I think he's still for a guy who's been around for a bit. He was a young guy in his draft class. He's still pretty young. I think he wouldn't hit free agency till like age 30 or 31 from now. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but yeah, an extra year sounds great on paper, but you can't worry about paper with a guy like that, like a guy who hasn't played 60 games
Made of
in his
paper.
entire life. Like, yeah, you just let him up. If he somehow can stay healthy for a year, great. You've got the 1 year he's going to stay healthy. If he gets hurt, then you cut someone else. I mean, I don't need putting him in center field. Honestly, I'd rather just put him out in right and not play this game with him in center, because I think that does increase injury risk. But I don't know who your center fielder is then.
Nolan Jones, come on down.
God, it's that situation where you're like, I don't know. It's again, story for another day. Well, there's some off the wall trade targets for that, but like center field is kind of a mess around baseball. So I understand if you put them out there and are just like, hey, don't crash into anything. It's not, an out isn't worth your health.
You are not Grady Sizemore. Do not do that.
No, but like there's not really a point. I mean, Valera at this point is kind of a borderline prospect. He's not a top 15 guy for me because there's a lot of holes in his game. So like, don't mess around. Just let him go out and see if he can sustain it. It's an unusual profile. There's a few players that are successful with it. Maybe he's one. And if he is, great. You get 6 years of control and then he's gone. If it's not, well, then you learn and you can move on to try someone else, because he's also a statue out there defensively, and that really kind of limits him. So you can't be precious, and you can't worry about that. Like if Bazzana is healthy and hits the way, like it's amazing to me how many people want to jump ship on a guy who was hurt for points of last year and also has some really good underlying data. There's a few people. I mean, Keith Law's list where he refuses to put Bazzana ahead of Condon, even though Condon has had just miserable minor league experience, is like mind blowing to me. But it's a situation like he blows the doors off. You call him up and you worry about everything else later. Like one extra year isn't worth it. Like it is and it isn't, right? Like that's what it comes down to. Like an extra year of control is huge. But you wait and you call a guy up in June, and if he's fantastic, like what happened with Tanner, guess what? He's still going to get that extra year anyways. There's things you can't always control. So just put yourself in a position to win. Yeah, call guys up when they're hot, because they're more likely to perform well at the big leagues at that point. Confidence is an important matter in all of these things. But like, don't kill your darlings, right? That's an expression sometime at some point. Like you have to be willing to, be taking some risks. If you are going to take this approach, then you cannot sit there and wait till June and then promote 2 guys and that's it. Like you have to be willing to, start the year with, heck, if they don't get a new DH, a new whatever, like then start the year with like Kafis as your first baseman, or Kafis, actually make Kafis your right fielder, Valera your DH, and your center fielder is DeLauter. Like run those guys out, see what they can do for half a year. And if someone's really terrible after 2 months, you can flip and get Brito, or maybe Brito's the DH and things like. But point stands, like give him 2 months. If someone is abysmal, then send them down to get some more reps. But like just see what you got. You got to start cycling guys through.
Right. It's the argument here is, I can't say the words on the air, but don't half anything, whole one thing. And if you can't add an Austin Hayes or a Lane Thomas to supplement your offense, which again would be what the ideal target was this offseason was Ref Snyder, right? Like not sexy on paper, but would have actually
just didn't want to come, unfortunately.
Right. It just didn't work out. It would have been a great fit here, but it didn't work out. So if your only path forward now is to sit there and claim that we want to give our young guys opportunities because we don't have any other moves up our sleeve and we couldn't do anything else we hoped to do, even it's disappointing. You do have this guy who just signed another market deal to play here until he's age 40, who continues to stay. And the whole reason we're sitting here arguing about this or talking about this is because you have that player that wanted to stay, who's the only guy you could ever keep that plays like this. You have to find a way to take advantage of it. And if you're not able to do that with external supplementing, like I know everyone, like the free agent market, I saw someone ask us the other day about, would you rather extend Quan or would you rather sign a stud free agent right-handed hitter? And I'm like, there is no stud free agent right-handed hitter. Like they were never going to sign Bo Bichette and like Eugenio Suarez, I wouldn't even call a stud. He'd be a nice fit.
He's got some decline in him. Like,
right. Still be a good fit.
There's a reason why he's left. Like, let's be honest.
Yes, there's a reason why he's still there. He thinks his market is better than it is. But my whole point here is like, okay, if this is the path you're taking, then yes, Chase DeLauter might as well be your starting center fielder on opening day. George Valera should be in right field or DHing, and you should have CJ Kafis. If you believe that these are the young guys that are going to be part, of your somehow improving offense this year, then they better be up. They better be playing when they're hot. Like there's no excuse. Like you said, Chase DeLauter, if he is somehow at age 31 still on 2 feet that aren't bionic and he's playing well, oh well. But at least you had him for 6 years. Do you even think, like, let's be honest here, do you think that even if Chase DeLauter for the next 4 or 5 years ends up being mostly healthy and playing well, would you even trust that by age 30, 32 or 33, he's actually going to be healthy at that point? Like he wasn't healthy at age 30, at age 23. What do you think he's going to be like at age 20, at 33? Like get the years out of him now and then screw what happens after that. If he somehow goes to the Dodgers 10 years from now and ends up being good, great. I don't actually care because I don't believe it's going to happen. But if it does, more power to him. Same with Bazzana. Like you said, you can't control all that stuff. What you can control is if you think you can help your team win right now because you have Jose Ramirez here, then he should be up right now or whenever right now is. None of this.
There's no tomorrow.
Around. There is no tomorrow. Correct. Yes. I'm sure that's a quote from something, but I don't know what you're referencing.
The song Right Now by Van Halen.
Oh, okay. Well, I should have known that one. That was sad. I guess in good news, it sounds like Jose Ramirez is not playing in the World Baseball Classic. I did think it was interesting during the press conference that somebody asked him about that, and he said he wanted to keep the press conference focused on this contract in Cleveland. And I was like, oh, that's very oddly non-committal. And then a couple hours later, I think Hector Gomez, who, let's be honest, has a very shoddy track record of news. He did get the extension. He was the first guy in the extension. Yeah. But he's also had some bad news in the past. But I could see when the Guardians were saying, you signed this extension. I think you should probably not play in the World Baseball Classic, Jose. And I can't say I disagree. I know he really wanted to, and it means a lot to him. But if you're going to sign the extension, let's avoid this kind of thing, please.
And we have to comment that this is probably the most, by all accounts, this is like the first time David Blitzer has taken any active
that too
hand in this team since he agreed to be a minority owner. Let's be honest, he's waiting to see what happens with the lockout that's upcoming before he agrees to be the majority owner. None of that's going to happen until he sees how things fall with that. Like his things are lined up perfectly for him to decide, hey, owners are in a better situation. I'm going to be a majority owner. Hey, owners are not in a better situation. I think I'll stay part-time. Like he is lined up to take advantage of the situation. But this is the first time he took an active hand by all accounts since he has come. So that's something we have to comment here on as well.
Yeah, keep that in your back pocket for sure going forward. All right, thanks for tuning in today to Locked On Guardians. Make sure you subscribe and follow everywhere you can get podcasts so you get the latest episodes. Jeff, we are back, as I said before, 5 days a week next week. So we've got a mailbag we got to do. So Monday will be a mailbag show. We'll be back talking Cleveland Guardians baseball with you 5 days a week from here until next December when there's a lockout. So you're going to get sick of us real fast because we're going to be back and it's going to be quite a while. So if you never miss an episode, make sure you check out the Everydayer Club. Get Locked On Guardians ad-free, members only Discord access. Head to lockedonguardians.supercast.com to learn more.
Thank you all for joining. Remember, rate and review. And data shows of our watchers, only about half our subscribers. So, hey, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for joining us today. And go Guardians, go.